After hours at the Athenian, long past last call, when Pike Place Market finally goes quiet. The crowds are gone, the vendors have packed up, and the hallways that buzz all day with voices and footsteps settle into a deep, echoing stillness. Inside the Athenian, the dining room sits in a soft blue glow from the waterfront windows, the kind of light that makes everything feel suspended, like the room is holding its breath. You start your final walkthrough, moving past the bar, past the old photographs on the wall, past the booths that have seen a century of conversations. The market has its own kind of silence at night. Not empty, just waiting. You can hear the faint hum of the refrigeration units downstairs, the dark creak of the building settling in its old beams, and the soft whisper of the wind coming off Elliott Bay. You step toward the back of the restaurant where the air shifts, cooler, carrying that faint mix of salt water, old wood, and something else you can't quite place. Check the service station. Empty. You check the hallway by the kitchen. Still. But the feeling follows you, a subtle awareness that someone is walking a few steps behind you. You head upstairs to the second floor bar, the one with the view that stretches out over the water. The room is dark except for the street lamps, reflecting off the bay. The tables are neatly set, the chairs tucked in, everything ready for the next day. But the air feels different up here, heavier, like the room is holding on to something that didn't leave with the last customer. You walk toward the windows, listening to the market breathe. Pipes cooling, wood contracting, the faint echo of footsteps somewhere far below, even though you know no one else is here. Then, from the far end of the bar, a glass clinks. Just once. Soft, deliberate. You stop, listening. Another sound, the faint scrape of a chair leg against the floor. Not loud, not rushed, more like someone easing themselves into a seat to watch the room the way they always have. You move closer, scanning the shadows between the tables. Nothing shifts, nothing moves, but the air feels different now, colder near the bar, warmer near the windows, like someone just walked through the space a moment before you did. You turn toward the staircase to head back down. Halfway down the steps, you feel it. That unmistakable sensation of someone standing at the top of the stairs behind you, watching you descend. You stop. You look back. The landing is empty, but the feeling doesn't fade. In the Athenian, the view isn't the only thing that lingers after dark. The Athenian first opened its doors in 1909, back when Pike Place Market was still young and the waterfront was a very different place. Seattle is growing fast, fueled by shipping, fishing, and the constant movement of people coming through the port. The market was chaotic in those early years, loud, crowded, full of vendors shouting prices and customers haggling over produce. Right in the middle of all that noise, the Athenian carved out its place. It started as a simple cafe, the kind of spot where fishermen grabbed breakfast before heading out on the water and dock workers stopped in for a drink long after long shifts on the piers. The floors were worn even then. The windows looked out over Elliott Bay long before the viaduct, the ferries, or the skyline took the shape we know today. As the decades passed, the Athenian grew with the market. It survived the Great Depression, when Pike Place nearly shut down. It survived the years when the city considered tearing the market down entirely, a plan that would have erased one of Seattle's most iconic neighborhoods. But the Athenian stayed open, serving regulars, travelers, and anyone who wandered in off the cobblestones. During World War II, the waterfront was a hive of activity. Soldiers and sailors passed through constantly, and many of them left their mark on the Athenian. Names carved into the tables, photos pinned to the walls, Stories traded over drinks before shipping out. Some never came back, but their presence lingered in the corners of the bar, in the old booths, in the quiet moments between the lunch rush and the dinner crowd. The market changed again in the 60s and 70s, becoming a haven for artists, musicians, and wanderers. The Athenian became a gathering place, a spot where you could sit for hours watching the ferries move across the bay, listening to the hum of the market below. The bar upstairs became a favorite for locals, especially those who wanted a drink with a view and a little distance from the crowds. And through all of this, the booms, the downturns, the reinventions, the Athenian kept its character. The wood darkened, the walls filled with photographs. The bar stools were smooth from decades of elbows and conversations. The place aged, but it never lost that feeling of being rooted, anchored to the market, to the waterfront, to the thousands of people who passed through its doors. Old buildings collect stories. Places like the Athenian collect something deeper. Maybe it's the constant flow of people. Maybe it's the market energy, loud by day, strangely still by night. Or maybe it's the simple fact that when a place stands this long, it becomes more than a restaurant. It becomes a witness. And the Athenian has been watching Seattle for more than a century. For a place that's been standing in the market for as long as it has, the Athenian doesn't have the kind of hauntings that shout for attention. They're quieter here, more like echoes or impressions, or the sense that someone is sharing the space with you even when the room looks empty. Most of the activity happens upstairs. Staff closing for the night have reported hearing the soft clink of glassware long after everything has been washed and stacked. Not a crash, not a spill, just a single glass shifting, like someone setting down a drink at the end of a long day. One bartender said she heard a chair slide across the floor behind her while she was counting the till. When she turned around, every chair was tucked neatly under the tables. The room was still, but the air felt different, colder near the bar, warmer near the windows, as if someone had just walked through the space moments before she entered. There's a recurring sighting of a man standing near the large windows overlooking Elliott Bay. He's not detailed, more of a silhouette, but people describe the same posture every time. Hands resting on the railing, head tilted slightly downward as if he's watching the ferries move across the water. He never turns, he never reacts, he just stands there. And when someone approaches, he fades, not disappearing suddenly, but thinning out, like a shadow losing its source of light. Some say he was a fisherman. Others think he was a regular who always sat by the window. No one knows for sure, but he's been seen enough times that staff don't question the story anymore. The market itself has a strange presence after dark, and the Athenian seems to absorb it. People closing up have heard footsteps in the hallway outside the restaurant. Slow, steady, unmistakable, even though the entire floor is locked and empty. Sometimes the footsteps stop right outside the door. Sometimes they continue past, fading into the distance. And when staff check the hallway, there's never anyone there. One server said she heard someone humming softly near the stairwell, a low, tuneless sound, but when she stepped closer, the humming stopped instantly, like whoever was making the sound realized they weren't alone. Kitchen has its own story. Late at night, when everything is cleaned and shut down, the swinging door between kitchen and the dining room sometimes moves on its own. Not a full swing, just a gentle push, like someone nudging it with their fingertips. One cook said he felt someone walk past him while he was finishing prep for the next morning. He felt the air shift the way it does when a person moves quickly beside you. but when he turned, the kitchen was empty and the door was still. What makes the Athenians' hauntings unique is that they don't feel tied to fear. They feel tied to routine, to people who spent so much time here that the building still remembers their movements. A glass shifting, a chair sliding, footsteps in the hallway, a figure watching the water. These aren't dramatic moments, they're familiar ones. Like the ghosts here aren't trying to scare anyone, they're just continuing their night. And in a place like the Pike Place, like the market, where thousands of people pass through every day, where stories stack on top of each other like layers of paint, it makes sense that some of that energy never really leaves. What I love about the Athenian is that it feels like a place suspended between two worlds. By day, it's loud and bright, full of clattering plates, conversations drifting up from the market, and the constant movement of people passing through. But after hours, when the crowds disappear and the waterfront settles into its slow, steady rhythm, the Athenian becomes something else entirely. There's a stillness here that feels intentional, like the building has taken a breath after a long day. In that quiet, you start to notice the layers, the worn wood, the old photographs, the view that hasn't changed as much as the city around it. You can feel the weight of all the people who've sat at these tables, watched the ferries cross the bay, or waited out a storm with a drink in hand. And maybe that's why the hauntings here feel so gentle. Not dramatic or frightening, just familiar. A glass shifting there, a chair sliding, footsteps in the hallway, a figure watching the water. These aren't the signs of something trapped or restless. They feel more like routine, like the people who spent years here simply never stopped coming back. Athenian has always been a place for of comings and goings, of early mornings and night shifts, of stories traded over coffee or whiskey. It makes sense that some of that energy would linger, and the market itself adds to it. Pike Place has a pulse, loud during the day, quiet but charged at night. The Athenian sits right in the middle of that rhythm, absorbing it, reflecting it, holding on to it. You can feel it in the air, especially upstairs, where the view stretches out over the water and the room feels like it's waiting for something. The Athenian isn't just a restaurant, it's a witness to the market, to the waterfront, to the people who've passed through its doors for more than a century. And if you spend enough time here, especially after dark, you start to understand why some presences never really leave. Thank you for spending some time inside the Athenian, a restaurant that's been part of the market's heartbeat for over 100 years. Even in the quiet moments, you can feel how much life has passed through here, how many mornings and nights it's held on to. But just a few blocks south, back in Pioneer Square, there's a place where the lights are off for good, and somehow the building still feels awake. We're going to go back to one of my favorite bars back in the day, the J&M Cafe.